Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight, Black Voices. I'm Brandis Friedman, and thanks for sharing part of your weekend with us. On the show tonight, the legal routes of providing a second chance to people with criminal records in a follow-up to our new series, Permanent Punishment. Remembering the events of 1919 in Chicago in a new Steppenwolf production from two Chicago women. Walking through a free outdoor celebration of black culture in North Lawndale next week.
You know, every finger is its own, canvas.
And we've got 10 reasons you should get to know the Chicago artist setting big trends with tiny masterpieces. All that's coming up, but our first story tonight, barriers to re-entering life after prison with a criminal record. That's right after this.
Chicago Tonight, Black Voices is made possible in part by Fifth Third Bank and by the support of these donors.
At Fifth Third, we believe when diverse voices are heard and empowered, communities are made stronger, lives are made better, and the future holds greater promise for all. That's why we're proud to support Chicago Tonight, Black Voices. Together, we can make a difference. Together, we can drive change.
Cook County is home to an estimated 1.3 million people with criminal records. Those records can sometimes limit people from certain jobs, housing, or even educational opportunities. The Paper Prisons Initiative estimates more than 500,000 of them are eligible to have those records cleared, but advocates say that's not happening for many of them. We're continuing our Permanent Punishment series from this week, and here to talk about the process and the challenges of records clearing are Aisha Edwards, Executive Director of Cabrini Green Legal Aid, Candace Chambliss, Legal Director of the Illinois Prison Project, and attorney Ina Silverglide, whose practice, A Bridge Forward, works with individuals facing obstacles to employment due to a criminal record. Thanks to the three of you for joining us here in studio. Aisha Edwards, let's start with you. So what or who are some of the people most affected by these limitations that happen post-incarceration?
Well, again, you noted the high number of folks who are impacted by the system. I can add some color to it. And specifically that, in general, that number is disproportionately people of color and people from low-income communities. For example, the demographics of our population that we serve are over 78% African American. There is also about 10% Latino, Latinx population. So significantly, our population is people of color who've been impacted by those records and those arrests that need to be addressed.
Candace Chambliss, your organization, you all work to gain clemency for people who are incarcerated. Give us a brief sort of primer on what clemency is and how it's achieved.
Sure. So clemency consists of either a pardon or a commutation of your sentence, and that's when you are asking that the sentence be changed. A pardon is asking that the conviction itself be changed. And so in the last 3 years, approximately 3,100 clemency petitions have been heard, and about 10% of those, almost 10%, have been granted.
Give us a brief sense of what the process is to get that happen.
So you draft a petition. You can do this through an attorney or pro se. You submit that to the Prison Review Board. That's a panel composed of lawmakers, teachers, stakeholders in the community. They will review it. You have a hearing if you choose to have a public hearing. They make a recommendation to the governor. And then his team reviews their recommendation as well as the petition itself and decides whether they will grant or deny the petition.
And there were just a set of hearings that happened this past week, correct? Here in
Yes.
Chicago. So in this week's Permanent Punishment series, we met a rapper, King Musa, whose given name is Brian Harrington, who was able to gain clemency and be released from prison back in 2020 after serving 13 years for felony murder. Here he is.
Even though I received clemency, my record still has felony murder on it. So what actually happened during my clemency, the commutation of sentence, was they commuted my sentence down to the 16 years, where the 13 years with 3 years of supervised release, which is parole, which I still have like 7 months of left. And so, so it's still there. It's still public record.
So, Ina Silverglide, what relief is there for a person like King Musa who received clemency but still has this record?
So in that scenario, the only thing that's happened is his sentence was commuted. The record still exists, and he would have a waiting period to petition to seal the record. Normally, it's a 3-year waiting period from when he gets off of mandatory supervised release, which oftentimes people refer to as parole. If he did some education while he was serving his sentence, and he has some sort of certificate of completion, then he would be able to petition to seal that record as soon as he gets off mandatory supervised release.
So it would be, he's still got some time, obviously, before that can
Yes.
happen.
So, when we talk to people who just got out of prison, we can't always do much for them.
Not right away. Aisha Edwards, can you explain, because we just talked about record sealing a little bit, explain what expungement and sealing are and who's eligible?
Yeah, so expungement and sealing are remedies for those who have a record. Expungement, it's kind of, you can explain it as almost like erasing it so that the record is actually destroyed. Sealing, however, it just hides it from public view for the most point. A lot of times things that are sealed are still accessible for those who work in law enforcement, so it's not permanently gone. And so it still may be available to certain government actions or folks seeking government employment, for example.
What can be some of the benefits for people if they manage to get a record sealed or expunged? How does that benefit them going forward?
Well, the benefits range significantly from being able to access employment, housing, even private housing. Folks are encouraged to check somebody's background before they have them sign a lease, and so it can pose, it can help with those barriers to housing as well, to access to benefits, access to resources to go back to school and things of that nature. But I think another important barrier that it helps overcome is sometimes an emotional barrier too. There are those who come out and have been impacted by the record and feel like they can't do anything, don't know their rights about voting, and often don't even try to do some things. And so it adds a peace of mind as well.
Candace, this week we reported that the clemency process, it can be long, sometimes it can be kind of dark. You don't really know what your chances are until the decision is made. And you just mentioned out of the 3,100 cases that were heard, 10% were granted. How realistic is obtaining clemency for people who are still incarcerated?
Yeah, it's challenging. I mean, if you consider the numbers of who's in prison, approximately 71,000 in Illinois, about 41,000 in state prisons. Of that population, about 10,000 people are serving sentences that are excessive of 20 years, and 64% of that population are folks who are black. And so it really is one of the only remedies. Once you have exhausted your appeals and you have been denied post-conviction relief, clemency is really one of the remaining mechanisms for meaningful review. But it is a long process. There is a wait. There are hundreds pending.
Ina Silverglide, I mean, based on what we just heard from Candace, is there more that the state could or should be doing to provide options for relief for people?
Are you talking about people still in prison or people who have finished their sentence?
Either way, maybe people who finish their sentence to start.
I don't know if we could push back against the 3-year waiting period. When I started doing this work in 2009, it was 4 years. So it's hard to say if there's room to make that type of change. What I'd really like to see is more educational opportunities in prison. We used to have more educational opportunities, and then we started cutting that funding. And there's a lot of people sitting in prison who we know are going to come out at some time, and they're sitting around doing nothing. And many of them would like to learn a skill or a trade or get a degree, and they would be much more successful when they get out if they have those things.
What is your advice to folks who, when they do come home that have criminal records, where should they get started in about 30 seconds?
If they don't have a skill that's marketable, they need to find one, because there aren't enough janitorial positions to hire everyone who thinks that that's the only job they can find.
Okay, a lot of work for a lot of people, and we thank the three of you for joining us, Aisha Edwards, Candace Chambliss, and Ina Silverglide for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Through the month of October, a series of events called Journey Chicago is taking place at cultural heritage centers across the city and suburbs. The Haitian American Museum of Chicago is among the collaborators of one of those events. an upcoming traveling exhibit kicking off next weekend in North Lawndale. Set among a tree-lined boulevard, We Walk will be a celebration of Black history and culture through music, art, and food.
It's a traveling exhibition that we bring to different communities. So the one that we'll be doing here on October 16th is in North Lawndale, and it's in partnership with the North Lawndale Pop-Up Spot and Crossing Borders Music, as well as a part of the Chicago Cultural Alliance Journey Chicago initiative. All the exhibits are leaned up against trees. And the reason for that is because trees are super important in Haitian culture, specifically in Vodou, in their religion, as a meeting space, as a place to come together. And so we wanted to replicate that in our exhibition, keeping the Haitian culture alive. We have some historians, some scholars, as well as the most important part, community organizations and individuals that make different exhibits that go against the trees, talk about who they are, talk about different parts of the Black community, talk about resources that they offer, and really, bring together that spirit of community. We're going to have lots of food, there's going to be music, lots of really cool big inflatables that are going to be there for the kids. Chicago was founded by a Haitian man, Jean-Baptiste Pointe-Toussaint, and we've been part of different coalitions that have helped push different ways to uplift Black and brown histories and communities. And I think just the landscape of how the world and nation is right now, so many experiences need to be shared, so many voices need to be heard. It's an amazing event, and I'm so glad that we're positively impacting lots of communities that need art and culture in their space.
And We Walk steps off on the Boulevard Green at Douglas Boulevard and Central Park Avenue in North Lawndale next Sunday, October 16th. You'll find more on that on our website. More than a century later, events leading to the killing of 17-year-old Eugene Williams at a segregated Lake Michigan beach in the summer of 1919 and the days of tragedy and violence that followed still echo in Chicago. In a new production adapted from Eve Ewing's collection of poetry about those terrible days, the Steppenwolf for Young Adults program explores 1919's legacy. Joining us now to talk about that is the playwright, J. Nicole Brooks. Nikki, welcome to Chicago Tonight, Black Voices, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, of course, this book, the play, was based on Eve Ewing's book of poems about the events of 1919. Remind us what happened in 1919 in Chicago.
In 1919, there was a unlawful killing of a young man named Eugene Williams who with his friends, crossed an unofficial racial barrier. So in other words, he and his friends were swimming and they drifted into what was considered the white waters. Eugene Williams was unfortunately murdered, and the person deemed responsible was George Stauber. He was stoned and eventually drowned, and that kicked off weeks and weeks of a pretty terrible race riot.
Terrible time in Chicago. So how do you turn then Eve's book of poetry into a stage production? You went from page to stage.
Very carefully.
I'm sure.
I'm a longtime fan of Eve Ewing's work. I think her work is not only beautiful, but I found her words to be visceral. And really, I found that we had a lot in common, even though I didn't consider myself to be a poet. But poetry can be very radical, and so it gives you the freedom to read the words that Eve Ewing has written, digest, and sort of push away from it and see what's left. And pretty much it's from that I was able to create the groundwork for the stage play of 1919.
Chicago is, of course, a city full of poets and poetry and history in poetry. Was that intimidating at all, working with this kind of source material in a city that loves poetry as it does?
I was not worried at all about any of it. Of course, it was terrifying.
It was simple.
It's like, please, Lord, let me please the ancestors and Gwendolyn Brooks and, Sandburg, all of the great poets here. I think I had to take a deep breath, and because I'm born and raised in this city, my voice belongs too. So once you get over it and see that the point of view is really quite clear from just about anyone who decides to tackle it, then you let go of the intimidation. And also, when you're making a play, you're not doing it by yourself. There's so many people that go into the development. So you never do it alone. You do it with a team of people, and that's exactly what we did.
What can people expect to see? Is this, a retelling of events partly? Because when taking poetry on the stage, I'm kind of curious, how's that going to work?
There is a structure to it. Even though the play is based on a book of poetry, there are characters, and the central character is a writer who is researching something else, and she comes across this information about what happened in 1919 at the lakefront. And so from there, the character delves into all of this. So it's a memory play. It's also a play that explores what if. What would have happened if Eugene Williams had not have drifted into the so-called white waters? What would have happened if Emmett Till may not have gone down south on the trip? So it explores so many things, and it comes from a diversity of voices from back then as well as today.
You've described this as a very physical play. What does that mean?
I think most of the plays that I've written include physicality. So I am deeply influenced by dance. I'm a former dancer. As an actor, clowning has also been very important in my career and my studies. So all of it goes into the story. I think it's important that we not only create images with words, but we also do something that's visual. So that's how it's in there. So there's lots of movement.
Sounds like in some ways this play is a reflection of you.
Yes, it is. And I think that reflection comes out of growing up here in Chicago. As Midwesterners, we like to think that we can run and jump and get our way through anything, and it's probably because of the snow that we deal with. But it certainly goes into this production, and I'm really excited for the world to see how this cast and ensemble does just that.
Yeah, that snow, it'll toughen us all up, won't we? We talked a lot about, 1919. In 2019, of course, a lot of Chicagoans learned about what happened for the first time on that 100-year anniversary. Do you think there's been sort of a rethinking of how those events happened here in Chicago?
I'd like to think so. I think people are willing to take a look into it. I think people hear the word or the term race riot, and frankly, everybody is exhausted. No one wants to tackle it. And for me, I made a promise to myself in my career that every year I would make a piece of art dedicated to the memory and the power behind Eugene Williams, as well as the 1919 race riot. So I've made a short film. I have written this play, and I plan to continue to do this until it gets to the point where we all know about the history of the lakefront and never take it for granted, so that something like this never, ever, ever happens again.
You've been on stage in front of a younger audience for a few days. What's been the response, the read from those younger folks? They're so fantastic. I have to say, when I'm writing, I don't really I don't think, oh, I'm writing this for a young audience. Oh, I'm writing this for 40-year-olds. When I write, and I want the same reaction, and that is for the audience to leave with a sense of investigation so that they can go and do their own sort of crawling through history, and hopefully they understand that levity and laughter is also a part of that journey. So you won't just come in and get a bunch of facts that might, make you sad. They will, but we have to embrace that. Sadness is a part of the power it takes to move forward, and that's what the experience of the play will hopefully leave the audience. And the young people are always honest. I'm sure they are. Yeah. Yeah, out of the mouths of babes. We've got about 20 seconds left. What do you want folks to take away from this production? I would like to have people take away from this production that we should be listening to young people. They always lead us. There's nothing new there. And so that's really what I want. I want people to pay more attention to young people. I want them to support live theater. And I want them to embrace the fact that Chicago has a long history, good, bad, and ugly, and it's up to us to find out exactly what happened. And of course, 1919 will play through October 29th in Steppenwolf's Ensemble Theater. And now our thanks to J. Nicole Brooks for joining us. And we're back with more Chicago Tonight Black Voices right after this. Though the canvas is small, intricately designed nail art has become a big part of personal and, of course, celebrity style. But the creators of those fingertip masterpieces are often overlooked. Hyde Park's Takara Spiffster-Sutton says credit is long overdue for nail artists like herself, whose trend-setting manicures have made her a favorite of celebrities and launched her design career. Producer Erica Gunderson nails this spiffy story.
Coming to Spiff is to know that you kind of got to sit back and like let me do what it is that I do. At the end of the day, you're here for the Spiffster experience.
When it came to making her way in the art world, Takara Spiffster-Sutton started out small, like pinky nail small.
Well, do you find that like this interaction kind of puts people at ease? Do you know what I mean?
Yes, completely. First thing I think is one thing that you do in your life where you're not doing anything with your hands. Like you're completely like immobile. I'm holding your hands the entire time. Like how often are you this close to somebody talking to them? Yeah, it gets people open.
Today, Sutton's bold and bright nail art has helped her reach deep into the design world, where her art now graces apparel, home decor, and more. But back when she was a teenage graphic design student, Sutton says she created her first designs on her own nails just to keep herself from biting them.
At that point, my design tool of choice was a Sharpie marker. Like I had like maybe one polish that I had bought from Walgreens.
Soon, Sutton's friends were clamoring for her to spiff up their nails too, and her bespoke manicures were in high demand. She says that's when she realized her nail designs could grab attention just about anywhere.
I just knew that I wasn't going to be at those ad agencies just yet. So how am I going to get my stuff out there or whatever? So doing nails in that capacity, it was like, okay, you know, I got friends that go to Columbia that are in these different spaces that I would like to be in. So it's like, if I can't be there, at least your nails can be there. So now the word is starting to circulate and a name is starting to be formed around it.
So how do you know when you're finished? Is it just a feeling?
It's a feeling, for sure. It is only a feeling that I can break. It's just whatever my soul wants to do.
15 years later, Sutton is a trendsetter in her own right, and she sees the hand of Black culture in nail design's emergence as an art form.
Black girl magic does have a very big influence on where nail artists today. Like I'm even seeing a lot of nail artists embracing like nail jewels and stonework. And growing up, that was seen as something that was like, oh, that's gaudy. She's not going to get the job. And now you're seeing these women out here who are the head of companies that got stones on their nails.
These days, Sutton is turning her hand to growing her visual design practice through collaboration.
It's launched me into conversations that your average nail tech wouldn't have. Like I got, CEOs and, of companies that are, consulting me about different design elements. I want to kind of embrace the season of collaboration. I know a lot of the best in what they do, and I'm the best of the best of what I do. So, hey, best of the best, let's make some better stuff.
And since she now only sees a select few clients in person, I felt very lucky to take home my own 10 tiny works of Spiffster's art.
Oh my God.
Mm-hmm. Get into it.
This is amazing. Like this is literally better than I imagined.
Yes.
That's
the reaction we're looking for always.
How do you get that level? I'm sorry, I'm yelling. Mm-hmm. How do you get that level?
That's the whole Spiff experience. Like,
I get to take these home with me?
They are yours, right? Mm-hmm.
For Chicago Tonight, Black Voices, this is Erica Gunderson.
Nailed it. For the record, Erica has not taken those little pieces of art off of her fingertips yet. If you'd like to add a little spiff to your own nails, good news, Sutton offers press-on nails and stickers of some of her greatest hits. You'll find more of that on our website. And that is our show for this weekend. Be sure to check out our website, WTTW.com/news, for the very latest from WTTW News. While you're there, make sure to read our story about early voting in Chicago. You can find out where you can vote before the November 8th election. And of course, you can still find our festival guide online just in time for all the fall festivals this season. If you're watching us on Saturday night, know that you can also catch Black Voices and Latino Voices on Sundays beginning at 10 p.m. And join me and Paris Schutz next week at 7 on Chicago Tonight. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight Black Voices, I'm Brandis Friedman. Thanks for sharing part of your weekend with us. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that supports free educational initiatives in the legal profession.